knows Connie knows that she stands fast for what she believes in, even to her own detriment. She's been instrumental behind the scenes to make sure that the interest of religious Australians, and not just from her own faith, but all religious Australians in New South Wales and the rest of the country are best represented in Canberra. Now, there's much happening behind the scenes with religious freedom at the federal level, and there's no one more qualified to bring us up to speed on this than the Honourable Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Con, and can I start by acknowledging my colleague, Guy Zangari. Thank you, it's always a pleasure to come to Fairfield. Can I acknowledge the religious leaders that are here today? Can I thank you, Dr. Con, for your energy, for your commitment to this cause, and for being the driving force behind this and the work that you do with the Australian Christian Alliance. Can I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out this afternoon to join us at this event. Now, on the 29th of August of this year, the Attorney General released the Religious Discrimination Act. This was a draft exposure bill and related bills relating to religious discrimination. Now, the bills deal with discrimination on the basis of religious belief, but only in key areas of public life. The bills do not create a positive right to freedom of religion, which the religious leaders, experts and stakeholders have been calling for, and which meet our international obligations. Now, following the release of these draft bills, it is certainly clear from my ongoing consultations and engagement with religious leaders that the bills fall far short of properly and fully addressing their requirements for religious freedom protection. They want a positive right that allows people to live in accordance with their convictions. And whilst religious leaders may have theological differences, there is strong solidarity amongst them, unified in their fight to protect freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion. Now, the need for this positive religious freedom law is due to the growing body of cases in Australia of people facing harassment, intimidation, and persecution because of their religious beliefs and actions. Now, some of these people are even losing their livelihoods. And in recent speeches in the Senate, I have taken the opportunity to raise some of these cases in the public arena. And can I acknowledge the work of the Australian Christian Lobby and the work that they've done through their legal section in bringing these cases to the fore. Now, when freedom of speech, of thought, of conscience and belief is framed only as an exemption to other rights, they are read down against those positive rights, rendering them subordinate to those rights. Now, in Australia, we have a framework of dealing with issues such as sex, race, through a framework of discrimination laws. And so effectively what the Attorney General has done with this bill is to, Mark Latham, sorry Mark, I didn't see you there before, acknowledge your presence and thank you very, very much. What the Attorney has now done is added another discrimination bill, and this is following the same framework as the other pieces of legislation. In effect, you say, well, you can't discriminate against a person for their religion, but these are the exemptions that you can do it for. And that's how these laws operate. So it's effectively you give with one hand and you take away with the other. Now, as a consequence of the necessity for a regime of positive rights in the form of religious freedom legislation, I think will give greater effect to the right to manifest one's freedom of thought, conscience and belief, as is Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which we are a signatory. Now, the attorney released his bill and asked for submissions. I'm pleased to say that there were thousands of submissions, and now, of course, what has happened, and just happened today, is that the Prime Minister has issued a statement to say that the religious discrimination bills will now not be released. There will be a further and second exposure draft, which effectively means that all of those concerns which have been raised by religious leaders, experts and stakeholders have, I think, hit the mark. Finally, we have worked out that this is a real issue. There are genuine and legitimate concerns that have been raised, and they need to be taken into account. And so I'm pleased that there is a delay to this. I have had real concerns in relation to the first bill, and I am hopeful that with further consultation and engagement that we can deal with those issues. Now, can I just put what is happening today into context, because it's really important. Australians have seen incursions in relation to issues pertinent to their religion over quite a number of years. Now, of course, during the election campaign, we saw the Israel-Folau issue. And suddenly, at the kitchen table, those quiet Australians, that silent majority of people of family and faith, would have been sitting there thinking, well, hang on a moment, if this can happen to somebody like Israel Folau, what happens if I quote my Bible? Will it get me into trouble? Now, that is a legitimate concern. Now, leaving aside the politics of the last federal election, the Liberal versus Labor issue, the reality is this issue landed in the middle of the election campaign, and certainly there was a perception that the coalition would be better placed to deal with religious freedom. I hope that we will be able to satisfy the faith that people put in the coalition to deal with this issue. Because ultimately, what will be important will not be what we as politicians say, but what will be important to you will be what your religious leaders say to you. If they say to you that they are confident that your religious freedoms have been protected, that is who you will listen to. You won't listen to me, you won't listen to others, you may listen to me, you may listen to some of my colleagues, but the important people who will influence your views will be people like Father here, who will say to his congregation, I believe that this bill will protect your religious freedom. And unless that happens, people in Australia will not feel assured. And that's why I have maintained how important it was for the government to listen to the views of religious leaders, of those religious experts in relation to this legislation. Now, to do otherwise, I think, will be to have not met the electoral expectations, and certainly from a coalition perspective, the faith that was put in us. Now, I talked about putting this in context. The results of the last federal election, and particularly the concerns that have been raised about religious freedom, have their antecedents in the same-sex marriage debate. Now, of the 17 electorates that strongly voted no, 12 of those were in New South Wales, with the majority falling here in Western Sydney. Now, we saw at the last federal election strong swings, particularly to the coalition and other parties in these seats, where we have especially culturally diverse and religiously diverse Australians. In 2015, at the National Press Club, I posed the question, how conservative is mainstream Australia? And to understand how conservative mainstream Australia is, you have to understand what is mainstream Australia today. Mainstream Australia today is made up of all of our diversities. I, as the daughter of migrants, my parents came to this country to build a better life for themselves and their family. They brought with them the ethos of their country of origin, Italy. For my parents, it was about hard work. It was about commitment. It was about family, and it was about commitment to their faith. And so do not underestimate the power of family and faith in our culturally and religiously diverse communities. That is why we are here in Western Sydney. That is why politicians like myself are reflecting the views like Guy and Hugh and Mark, because we know that in this diversity there's strong views about family and faith, and that is why it is incumbent on us to make sure that we represent your views in our respective parliaments. Last year, we saw alleged allegations that gay students were being discriminated against in schools. I participated in the Senate inquiries that dealt with that issue, because of course the Sex Discrimination Act does afford exemptions in relation to religious schools. We found no evidence that people or children, young people, were being discriminated against. There was no evidence. Indeed, we actually found that the exemptions that were in place were actually providing a very important framework for religious schools to deal with the complexities that come with children who are gay. So therefore those exemptions played a vital role. During that Senate inquiry, we got almost 10,000 submissions, predominantly put in over the Christmas vacation period. And so I now come to where we're at the moment. There is still time for people to have their say. And I will conclude on this, and I'm sure that there'll be questions later. So what have I asked Australians to do? I've asked Australians to sign a petition. I have launched a petition for the Senate. The Senate's rules require that petitions all be hand-signed, so therefore only original signatures can be lodged in our Senate, and I'm very, very pleased. I was about to lodge the third tranche of 10,000 in the Senate this week, but unfortunately other matters overtook. But my petition calls for protection of freedom of speech, of thought, of conscience and religion. And I have copies of that available to you at the back. But I want to leave you with this message: the importance of civic engagement. How many people are there in New South Wales? Yes, 8,000 people. Do you know how many people are active in a political party? 30,000. So only 30,000, and of those 30,000, there's roughly about 500 to 1,000 in each of those political parties that are really the activists. So therefore, I say to you, if you want more politicians in Macquarie Street and in Canberra that reflect your values and beliefs, then you have to be active. You have to be involved. You have to join a political party, so that those political parties, when they make their decisions about issues that are of importance to you, there will be people in their ranks who actually reflect the views of the silent majority. So that's what you can do. I urge you to pray.
Prayer is important, but prayer is not going to change the views of government. Cold, hard numbers and votes is what changes political opinion. And so I urge you, as you walk out of this meeting, the only way that your religious freedom will be protected is if you stand up for your values and beliefs. And you join a political party. And remember, and Alec has said this recently, when a silent majority remains silent, it will lose its majority. Okay? We have to remember that. Thank you very, very much.